as you know, in my early days, I worked for the phone company as a technician, and I would go in Manhattan. I would go in and out of the office every day, and was kind of fat, dumb, and happy. It was a great job. It was allowed me the opportunity to, I'd say, have an above average income. But there was this one guy who would always tell me that data processing, which was what it was called back then, he's like, listen, Michael, you're a smart guy. You need to get into this field, and it'll help advance your career. And at the time, I was a union steward, and didn't really want to get into a management role. And all of the IT roles or data processing roles were management roles. But the guy was relentless, and so I said, well, "Listen, well, I'll take the test for it, and I'll talk to this woman, that runs the training for it." So I took the test, did really well on the test. So once I did that, not only was he after me every day, but I'd have to see this woman every day as well. And so they just kind of ganged up on me and said, "Listen, you got great aptitude for this. You need to do this. This will change your career." And so I did that, and then I spent, the last 8 years at that company. I was there 15 years in the IT realm. So just kind of started out as a programmer and started to work my way up to, I left as a director in that business. But it was really just, those two people stepping on my path and being relentless about, me taking this path, and that I think they saw something in me that I didn't see in myself at the time. Technology by itself doesn't really do anything. Um, and although we're getting into cognitive computing and different domains now where we're trying to teach computers to learn, ultimately it has to solve a problem or address an issue to be relevant. And in order for that to do that, in order for that to happen, it has to have some applicability. And so, yeah, I think technology can be disruptive, and I think the pace of technology today allows us to find new and creative ways to solve problems. I kid with somebody. I was telling somebody the other day that Uber, that innovation that came to market completely disrupted the transportation and taxi industry. But it solved other problems as well. So, like, if you're a black man in Manhattan trying to get a cab, in the 70s, you couldn't get a cab. But now with Uber, you can get a cab and they can't distinguish or, discriminate against you in that way. So it actually solved a social need as well as a business need. And so I think technology still has the capability to be disruptive. But once it becomes that disruptor, then it creates new models for us to grow and build on, I think. So I look at it as an enabler. I would say probably the more recent technologies are probably going to be the most disruptive, and we'll see the pace of technology innovation grow even faster than it did in the past. But I worked for Microsoft for a long time, and one of the things that I think was really bodacious was that Bill Gates had this vision that there would be a computer in every home, and they looked at it as taking the capabilities that businesses had and putting in the consumer's hands. And so I think that consumerization of technology is really what has made the biggest contribution. So when it got out to the masses, you look at Apple and the iPhone, and the way that smartphones have changed people's lives. So I think those are starting to be the biggest, or have been the biggest contributions in the past. But as you go forward, I think cognitive computing, cloud services are really things that are changing the way that businesses operate. But also, there's a huge consumer influence. So the industry that I'm tied to now is healthcare, And healthcare was one of the technology laggards for a long time, but over the past 5 to 10 years, they've stepped into rapid adoption of technology and a lot of that was changed by a few things. One, the pervasiveness of technology. So cloud technologies make the cost lower, and that's important for startups too, because in the past, if you were starting a technology company, you had to invest tons of money and capital and infrastructure and buying that. But now with cloud services, you pay for what you use, and so you don't have that huge capital expense. But the other piece of that is now that people have access to that information as consumers, they're driving the requirements of the businesses to create new and innovative ways to get and manage that information. Cloud is inevitable for all of the reasons that I talked about before. It breaks down it breaks down barriers to entry for businesses and startups, and so having compute power, on the ready, so to speak, I think is important. Um, but I think it also allowed for innovation for software as a service. So now companies are developing applications that you can consume on as you want, as opposed to having to buy a license, install it, and then manage it, update it, and all that good stuff. So that again is, I think, changing the way we view technology going forward. And then obviously security is paramount. I mean, we continue to struggle with that in the regulated industries like financial services, healthcare, government, etc. We got to make sure that we have security top of mind. And so, there are all kinds of new technologies like microsegmentation from a security perspective, where you can, almost insulate applications inside of an infrastructure environment. And so that, if something gets breached, it only gets a small thing. The Equifax thing that just happened recently is major, right? You think about it. You talk about disruptors. I think, Congress and others are going to start to look at, is that really necessary for everybody to have a social security number and, have all of this information in a huge repository. But again, I think Equifax could have probably done a bit better job in terms of, building different layers of security into their systems that allow them to, even if a breach happened, it wouldn't be half the country. One is, I feel like I'm an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur my entire life, whether I was working inside a large organization or not. You could call it an intrapreneur. Um, but I've always looked to innovate and build and find new ways to do things. And so I think today, as I mentioned earlier, um, the barriers to entry have been taken down for the most part in terms of uh, getting a technology to the masses. So anybody can create an app today or a service, and not be have to put a huge capital infrastructure together. But the thing that I think most startups fail in is being very focused on their mission and what they're trying to accomplish. So, be able to focus and not try to do everything. Really focus on, how you want to get to market. Time to market is critical. And so, focus on the thing that's going to get you in the market the earliest. The second thing is, although the barriers to entry from a technology perspective have been lowered, there's still you still need access to capital. So relationships around, how do you find capital? Whether it's your own, angel investors, family and friends. There are a lot of investors out there, family office, VCs at private equity companies. Not so much private equity and VCs in the early stage, but you got to make sure that you have a really strong plan around how you're going to fund your business. And then the third thing, once you have that focus around mission and product, you're working on how you're going to fund the business. you got to make sure that you have folks in the domain that you're trying to get to lined up. So if it's a a commercial enterprise and you're trying to get the businesses, knowing who those key stakeholders are, and how do you build a market would be critical. So there are actually two, but the one I think was most interesting to me is, I ran the public sector business for Microsoft in the Middle East and Africa. And when you look at that geography and that territory, you have such a disparity amongst the countries. And so when you say public sector, you're talking about selling to governments. But in that industry, but in that geography, it covers all industries. So oil and gas, banking, education, healthcare, those are all government entities, right? In most of those countries. So, getting that perspective, diversity of perspective, we had some of the richest countries per capita, like the UAE and Saudi Arabia, to where, how they bought and what they wanted to do with technology was very different than, Burkina Faso or the Congo in Africa, in terms of, where they didn't have the infrastructure. They had basic needs. So one of the projects we did in Senegal was they had an old telephone booth in the village. And when people died or were born, in order to record um, um, births or deaths, they would have to travel to Dakar, the capital, and then come back. It was like 100 and something miles. So the phone was there. People really didn't use the phone infrastructure. But what we did was, although it was slow, we put in a dial-up modem, uh, and they were then and hooked it up to a computer, and then they were then able to electronically record births and deaths, so people didn't have to make that 100-mile trek. So that disparity of where people are in the world and how technology can impact their lives was amazing to me. And so I thought that was probably one that presented both the best rewards and the biggest challenges. And
Wow.
I could go on and on and on and on about what the challenges were around corruption and piracy of software. There were just a ton of things that you had to deal with on a regular basis. But it really was one of the most rewarding opportunities I had. The thing I will tell you about some of those problems that we have in the world. So I was telling you about the platform, that forum that comes together around sharing social impact technology. There was a young brother there that created an app, um, and it was around communications in prison. Um, but it would allow people to get around that standing in line and waiting for your turn to get a phone call, or there was like they had one app or one phone in the cell block or whatever that people could use, and they could communicate and text, and in a secure manner that allowed them to communicate. So you or I probably wouldn't ever have thought to solve that business problem, but this young brother who was incarcerated before knew it was an issue and started to solve for that. The other thing is, I mentioned the whole thing around Uber, but for me, it's like I never have a problem getting a cab now. It's like, I even when I go to hail a cab and a cab will blow by me, then I'm like, oh man, I should have just whipped out my phone and got Uber anyway, right? Or Lyft or whatever. But those kinds of things I think come from the experiences that you have in life. And so what I would say is people have to expose themselves to a broad set of experiences. Stephanie, right?
Yep.
Your dad's friend,
Yeah, it's definitely Lampkin.
Lampkin. You know, she saw a real issue from living a life experience where, with all the degrees and all of the pedigree that she had, she still couldn't get the roles that she wanted in technology, because people have unconscious bias around who should be in and who shouldn't be in. And so she's created technology to kind of, level the playing field around that. So, those type of opportunities, I think there are two things. And my dad always used to say this to me is like, you have to be able to recognize opportunities in life when they present themselves. And you also have to prepare yourself to take advantage of those. So you never know when an opportunity is going to come, but you always have to make sure that you're prepared to take advantage. And so I would say people should just be open, Dexter, around their environment and the things that they see, and then be willing or prepared to act on that. I want to do things that I believe have will have impact, and where my skill set and background will be able to add value to an organization. And so the things I look for are, organizations that are progressive, that want to be innovative, want to make a change, and that's why I gravitate to healthcare, because there's such a tangible impact that can be seen through technology. And if we can reduce costs, if we can improve the delivery of care, if we can improve access to healthcare, those are things that are tangible and that you can see results from. But in a taking a position in a large organization, the things I consider is the management, their commitment to looking at diverse point of view, their commitment to funding, quite frankly, and making sure that you have the right resources to be successful. Obviously, reputation is important. I want a good balance between corporations or organizations that are good corporate citizens and understand the need for community development, as well as the need to make money. So I don't know if you know this, but I just joined a new organization, VMware, and so I'm a couple of months in there now, and I'm running their healthcare business in the Americas. But two things were important to me then. One is that they continue to let me be an investor and do the stuff that I want to do from an investment perspective. But two, that they gave me the freedom to be able to help build this business. And so they hired me for my expertise in that industry, and they're giving me the resource to build that. So that's important as well. When I was at Microsoft and I was running the healthcare business, one of the things that we started to do as we evolved our business model was find early stage companies that we thought had disruptive potential, particularly in healthcare, and we would invest in them so to get them on our cloud platform. The reality was at that time, 3 or 4 years ago, they either defaulted to Google or Amazon in terms of their cloud platform. And so what I did was I put together a team that was actively looking at early stage healthcare companies, and we worked with our venture arm inside of Microsoft and started investing in those. And it wasn't just about giving them money or giving them free compute cycles. What we told them was we would help them grow their business. So we would take the Microsoft field sales force, in healthcare, which was a $3 billion business, and we'll help put that muscle behind your business and your company if you come to our platform. And that was a differentiator for us in the market. It still is for Microsoft. And so as I was seeing this, I was seeing these really cool companies that we were working with and investing in, and it just light bulb went on. I was like, well, this could be the long term play for me in terms of my retirement, is if I can find 4 or 5 companies to invest in and to continue to help them find their place in the market through connections that I have. It just made sense to me. So what I invest in are companies that primarily are based on Microsoft technology, have the potential, I feel, to be disruptive in the way that they either deal with one of 2 or 3 things. And I'll send you to my website. It's pretty clear there. But the first one is, I like companies that look at health disparities or figure out how we get access to the broader population through technology. I also like companies that solve for issues that are prevalent in our community, like obesity and uh, uh, diabetes and things like that. So care management platforms are important. And then the third one is just in general as a platform, data analytics is something that I'm interested in. I believe that will be transformative in the healthcare. So when you talk about predictive analytics in terms of patient care, population management, I think there's an opportunity to for companies to be disruptive there. My risk profile, I'd say, is a medium risk profile, and so I want companies that already have revenue. I don't believe in high flyers, no revenue unicorns. So they have to have customers and revenue. I look at the management. Most of the companies I've invested in, I have some familiarity with the folks that run that company. And then the third one for me is, did it fit in those three buckets that we talked about before? Companies that I'm advising that I invest in, or there's a company that I sit on the board of, a privately held company. It's a VC backed company, and I really feel like my role as a board member is to bring relevant technology and industry expertise, and to be an advisor to the CEO. And so, we work really closely with the CEO, the company that I'm on the board. I'm on their healthcare advisory board as well. So that's the committee that I serve on. Um, and also, part of that role is just general governance of the company and fiscal fiduciary responsibility, making sure that the company is operating under principles that are solid, and make sure that we're moving in a direction. You also have the opportunity, the obligation to make sure that you're doing what you can to help grow the company as well, particularly since they're early stage. So this company is a $10 million company. So it's not huge from a revenue perspective, but it's been in business a long time, and they have a loyal customer base. And what they're trying to do is move into adjacent markets now. And so, my role is to help advise them into how they move into healthcare with some of the technology they have. Basically, the company has pattern recognition technology that they've used in the intelligence community. So those three-letter agencies in the government, they look for patterns and figure out how they do that. But that same technology, that OCR technology, could be used in healthcare around, reading images and doing diagnostics on images and things like that.